Hello, lover of creepy stories. I got 3 chilling stories told by people of 4chan about paranormal encounters with mysterious. Let's call them creatures and people. If you're thinking about exploring the unknown, this might make you think twice. A few years back, I was going through a rough patch. My girlfriend had just left me and I was stuck in a dead-end job. To clear my mind, I started exploring abandoned places in my hometown. Yeah, I know, cliché as hell, but it gave me a weird kind of comfort. There was this old mansion on the outskirts of town that everyone said was haunted. You know, the type: big iron gates, overgrown yard, windows all boarded up. It had been abandoned for decades. Locals called it the Blackwood House. Stories about the place ranged from mass murder to satanic rituals. I didn't buy any of it, but the more I heard, the more I felt this urge to check it out. One Saturday, I decided to go. I packed a flashlight, my camera, and a crowbar just in case. It was around 10 p.m. when I parked my car a few blocks away and walked to the mansion. The air was usual sunny weather, so I didn't feel any fear. Instead, I felt excited. Haha. I hopped the gate and made my way to the front door. It was locked, obviously, but a few swings of the crowbar took care of that. Inside, the air was musty, and the only sound was the creaking of the floorboards beneath my feet. The place was a mess. Furniture covered in white sheets, paintings on the walls, all tilted and covered in dust. It was like stepping into a time capsule. I started snapping pictures, hoping to catch something interesting. As I moved deeper into the house, I felt this weird sensation, like I was being watched. I don't feel any fear usually, because at that point I was experienced in exploring places like this. And the reason I liked doing this is not because I like to tingle my nerve. I just love the aesthetics of old abandoned building, and plus, you finally can be 100% alone with your own thoughts. But this time, it wasn't the case. You know that feeling you get on the back of your neck? Yeah, that. I started to feel that. The living room was the creepiest. There was this massive mirror above the fireplace covered in grime. I wiped it off, and for a second, I thought I saw something move behind me. I turned around, but there was nothing there. Just an empty room. Very freaking creepy, but I stand there for a minute, decided it was my imagination, and moved on. After a while, I ended up in the basement. The stairs creaked with every step, and the air got colder the deeper I went. At the bottom, I found a door. It was slightly opened, and when I pushed it open, I saw this room filled with old, rotting furniture. And there, sitting in a dusty armchair, was a man. A fucking alive man, usually sitting there like nothing. I started running up to the door, but guess what? It was closed. I looked back and he was down there staring at me. He started to speak and he sounded like a normal, polite man. It was weird as hell and I still felt danger, but I had no other choice than go down to him. He was wearing this old-fashioned suit and a hat. His face was wrong. It was like a Rorschach from Watchmen, all shifting patterns and no features. He started to ask me what I am doing here and stuff like that. I asked him about his face, and he asked me what face. I processed for a minute and told him his head has no face, just patterns. He answered me with, "There is no face, there is no me, and what is more important, there is no you." Then out of nowhere he said, "It's time." I asked, "Time for what?" But he just stood up from his chair, walked over to the corner of the room where a rope was hanging from a beam. I watched, paralyzed, as he put the noose around his neck and kicked the chair away. His body dangled there, swaying slightly. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His last words were, "I told you, there is no me, there is no you." I ran to the door again, and I had enough of this fucking house. The door was finally opened, and as soon as I opened it, suddenly, the lights flickered, and I heard this faint laughter echoing through the basement. I ran through all house and stopped to catch my breath and tried to make sense of what just happened. I continued to run towards the exit, but the house changed. I am sure that wasn't a physical change, more likely psychological. I just didn't remember where is the exit. I walked near living room, and that's when I heard it, a faint scratching sound coming from the mirror. I cautiously approached it, my heart pounding as hell in my chest. As I got closer, I expect everything, but I saw my reflection. Everything was okay until my fucking reflection was smiling, this wide, unnatural grin that sent chills down my spine. I backed away, but the reflection didn't. It raised a hand and started tapping on the glass like it was trying to get to me. To my dimension, I guess. I turned and ran again, searching for the front door. After I ran what felt like 10 miles, I finally recognized an entrance door, but it slammed shut before I could reach it. I was trapped. Panicking, I decided to hide in one of the upstairs bedrooms. Maybe if I stayed quiet, whatever was happening would stop. I found a room with a bed and a closet and barricaded myself inside. For hours, I sat there, clutching my flashlight, waiting for the first light of dawn. Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps outside the door. Slow, deliberate, getting closer and closer. They stopped right outside the room, and I held my breath. The door creaked open, and the man with the hat stepped in. But he was different now. His face was twisted, almost demonic, and he had this malevolent energy about him. "You shouldn't have come here," he whispered, his voice like nails on a chalkboard. "This house doesn't like visitors." I tried to speak, to apologize, but no words came out. He reached out, his hand passing through the air like smoke, and grabbed my wrist. It felt like ice. Then everything went black. I woke up in my car the next morning, parked in front of my apartment. My camera was on the seat beside me, but the memory card was gone. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck, my whole body ached, and my head was pounding. I think I don't need to explain that never went back to that house again. For weeks, I had nightmares about that night. The man in the hat, the mirror, the laughter. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me home. I started noticing things in my apartment. Items moved, whispers in the middle of the night, shadows that didn't belong. One night, I woke up to see my reflection in the mirror at the foot of my bed. It was smiling again, that same unnatural grin. I covered all the mirrors in my place after that. Years have passed and I've tried to move on, but every now and then, I still see that smile in my dreams. And sometimes, just sometimes, I hear a faint scratching at my bedroom door. But the biggest question, is this all real? What I see, what I feel, is this real paranormal things or I am psychologically ill? Of course, I can reach for someone who might help me, because simply I will instantly go to the mental hospital. Maybe this is the right way to do. That's my story, but take my advice, some places are abandoned for a reason. Curiosity can lead you down some dark paths, and once you start, there's no guarantee you'll ever find your way back. Hey X, I've got a story to share, and I promise it as not just another creepypasta. This actually happened to me, and it's been haunting me ever since. I can't keep it to myself any longer, so here it goes. So, my buddy Jake and I decided to check out this cave system we heard about. Locals said it was haunted or some crap, but we thought it would be a cool adventure. You know, just the usual weekend thrill-seeking. We packed our gear, some snacks, and an old sketchy map from this drunk dude at a bar. Perfect setup for a disaster, right? We find the entrance this dark, gaping hole in the ground, hidden by a ton of vines and bushes. We had to hack our way through like we were in some low-budget jungle movie. Headlamps on, ropes secured, and in we went. Man, this place was huge, tunnels snaking off everywhere. Our voices echoed like crazy, making it sound like we had a whole squad with us. We joked about the echoes, trying to scare each other with ghost stories. Classic dumbass move. As we got deeper, it got colder, and the darkness was so thick it felt like it was wrapping around us. Our headlamps barely cut through it, casting these creepy, dancing shadows on the walls, and those noises faint whispers, or maybe just dripping water. But the echoes, dude, the echoes were off. They lasted too long, carried too much detail. After about an hour, we hit this massive cavern. The ceiling was so high our lights couldn't reach it, and the walls were covered in these ancient markings like something out of a history book. Jake was all over it, snapping pics with his phone while I checked out the ground, littered with broken pottery and bones. Yeah, bones, old as hell. Then we heard it. A voice clear as fuck, "Help me," it said, all soft and desperate. We froze, staring at each other like idiots. Jake called out, "Who's there?" And his voice just bounced back at us, mixing with the other voice until we couldn't tell which was which. We decided to follow the sound because, of course, we did. Navigating through these tight, twisting passages, the echoes got louder, more frequent. Soon it wasn't just one voice, but a whole damn chorus pleading, screaming, whispering secrets. It was like the walls were alive, telling us all these horror stories. Jake was leading when he suddenly stopped, and I almost plowed into him. There was a light ahead, flickering like a candle. We crept closer and found an old lantern on a stone altar covered in dried blood. The air reeked of it. I felt sick, but Jake was drawn to it. He reached out, and that S when we heard a growl followed by a scream. It echoed everywhere, making it impossible to tell where it was coming from. Then the floor collapsed. We fell into a pit, landing on a bed of bones. I could feel them breaking under me, and I scrambled to my feet, my head spinning. Jake was beside me, looking as freaked out as I felt. We had no choice but to move forward. The pit walls were too steep to climb. The echoes here were insane, a constant assault of voices, each one reliving its final moments. They weren't just sounds, they were trapped souls. And we were in their domain. Jake was losing it, and honestly, I was too. We stumbled through the tunnels, the voices getting louder, angrier. I felt their despair, their rage, closing in on me. The air was thick with it, suffocating. We stumbled into another chamber, and this one was bad news. More symbols on the walls, a big stone slab in the center, stained with blood, chains hanging from the ceiling. I didn't want to think about what they'd been used for. Jake was drawn to the slab like he was in some kind of trance. I grabbed his arm, trying to pull him back, but he shook me off. "We need to get out of here," I hissed, but he didn't listen. He stepped onto the slab, and the ground shook. The echoes turned into a deafening roar, the air vibrating with some evil energy. Shadows moved in the corners of my eyes, shapes that didn't make sense, twisted and wrong. Jake screamed a sound of pure terror, and then he was gone. Just vanished. I was alone. The echoes closed in, a relentless tide of agony and betrayal. I could hear Jake's voice among them begging for help. But there was nothing I could do. I ran, blind with fear, the tunnels a blur around me. The voices followed, whispering, screaming, laughing. Somehow, I found the entrance and stumbled out into the sunlight, gasping for air. My mind was a wreck. I could still hear the echoes, faint but persistent, like they followed me out. I made it back to town, but no one believed me. They said Jake probably just got lost, that I was in shock. But I know what I heard, what I saw. The cave took him, just like it took so many others. I haven't gone back, and I never will. But the echoes haunt me, a constant reminder of the souls trapped in that dark, hellish place. If you are ever near there and you hear whispers in the wind, turn the fuck back. Don't let the cave take you too. Stay safe, X. Hey, X. This is my personal story of how a routine hike turned into a goddamn nightmare. So, a few weeks ago, me and my friends Alex, Jenny, and Mark, all names changed, decided to take a break from our boring-ass lives and go for a hike. Alex had found this remote forest online, some off-the-grid spot with killer views and zero cell reception. Perfect for unplugging, right? Yeah, big fucking mistake. We packed our gear, loaded up the car, and set out early Saturday morning. The drive took us deep into the middle of nowhere, the kind of place where you start wondering if you're going to end up on the evening news. By the time we got there, it was already late afternoon. The forest was dense, like the trees were trying to block out the sun. It had this eerie, quiet vibe, but we shrugged it off. We were there for adventure, not ghost stories. The first day was pretty chill. We found a decent spot to set up camp and spent the evening around the fire, drinking beers and bullshitting about work and life. Jenny kept going on about how the air felt different, like it was thicker or something, but we all laughed it off. She's always been the paranoid type. The next morning, things started to get weird. I woke up with a pounding headache and a nasty cough. I thought it was just a hangover, but then I noticed Alex and Mark were coughing too. Jenny seemed fine though, which she didn't hesitate to remind us. She was already packing up her stuff, eager to hit the trail. We decided to push on, thinking it was just a bad night asleep or maybe the change in air pressure. As we trekked deeper into the forest, the coughing got worse. My chest felt like it was on fire, and every breath was a struggle. Alex, always the tough guy, kept insisting we were fine, just out of shape. But by midday, even he was looking pale and exhausted. That's when Jenny found the first weird thing. We stumbled upon this clearing with a bunch of old rusted machinery scattered around. Looked like logging equipment, but it was all ancient, like it hadn't been touched in decades. There was this old bulldozer with a tree growing through it, and it gave me the creeps. Jenny said we should turn back, but Alex, stubborn as hell, wanted to keep going, said we were too far in to quit now. By evening, I was feeling like absolute shit. My cough was brutal, and I could barely keep my eyes open. Mark wasn't looking any better. Jenny kept nagging us to head back, but Alex refused. He said we were almost to the peak, and he wasn't about to let a little cold stop him. Idiot. That night, things went from bad to worse. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of Jenny screaming. I stumbled out of my tent, coughing up a lung, and saw her standing there, pointing at something in the dark. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it where she was pointing. There, not 10 feet away, was this thing. It looked like a person, but its skin was all wrong. Pale, almost translucent with these dark, sunken eyes. It just stood there, staring at us. Alex grabbed a stick and started yelling at it, trying to scare it off. But it didn't move. It just kept staring. Finally, Mark, who'd been silent this whole time, picked up a rock and chucked it at the thing. It let out this god-awful screech and bolted into the trees. We didn't sleep the rest of the night. We huddled around the fire, coughing and wheezing, jumping at every little noise. By morning, we were all a wreck. Mark was barely conscious, and Alex, wasn't he, much better. Jenny and I were scared shitless, but we knew we had to get the hell out of there. We packed up as fast as we could and started back the way we came. Every step was torture. My lungs felt like they were going to explode and my legs were jelly. Alex kept trying to joke around, saying we'd have a hell of a story to tell when we got back. But I could see the fear in his eyes. Then, halfway back, we found something even worse. Lying in the middle of the trail was a deer, or what was left of it. Its body was torn open, guts strewn everywhere, but there was no blood. None. It looked like it had been drained dry. Jenny started crying, saying we were cursed or some shit. I didn't want to believe her, but deep down I was starting to think she was right. We pushed on, desperate to get back to the car. That S when Mark collapsed. He just crumpled to the ground, clutching his chest, gasping for air. We tried to help him up, but he was dead weight. Alex, still coughing like a madman, said we needed to leave him, go get help. Jenny refused, said we couldn't just abandon him. They started arguing, voices getting louder and louder when we heard it again. That screech, it was closer this time, too close. We all froze, and I swear I could feel my heart stop. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. The thing from the night before was back, and it wasn't he alone. There were 3 of them now, circling us, watching. Alex picked up a branch, trying to look tough, but I could see his hands shaking. Jenny was clutching Mark, crying her eyes out. And me? I was just standing there, trying not to piss myself. Then, without warning, they charged. Alex swung his branch, but it was useless. They were on him in seconds, tearing at him with these long, bony fingers. I grabbed Jenny and we ran. I didn't look back. I just could not. The sound of Alex's screams will haunt me forever. We ran and ran, crashing through the underbrush, coughing and wheezing until we couldn't run anymore. We collapsed against a tree, trying to catch our breath. Jenny was in hysterics, and I wasn't far behind. I kept thinking about Mark, about Alex, about how we were never going to make it out of this goddamn forest. That ass when I saw it. An old cabin, barely visible through the trees. It looked abandoned, but it was our only hope. We stumbled towards it, praying it wasn't just a mirage. The door was unlocked, and we practically fell inside, slamming it shut behind us. The place was a wreck, but it was shelter. We barricaded the door with whatever we could find and collapsed on the floor. Jenny was still crying, whispering about how we were going to die out here. I didn't have the heart to tell her she might be right. We spent the rest of the day huddled in that cabin, too scared to move. By nightfall, the coughing had gotten so bad I thought my lungs were going to burst. Jenny wasn't much better. Every breath was agony, and I could feel the fever burning me up from the inside. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, we heard it. That goddamn screech right outside the door. Jenny started sobbing, and I felt my heart sink. They had found us. The door rattled, and I grabbed a rusty old knife I'd found in the cabin, ready to make a last stand. But then something strange happened. The screeching stopped, replaced by this low, rumbling growl. There was a scuffle, and then silence. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, too scared to move. Eventually, I worked up the courage to peek out the window. The things were gone, but there was something else out there. Something big with glowing red eyes watching the cabin. I pulled back, my mind racing. What the hell was going on in this forest? Jenny and I spent the night in terror, waiting for whatever was out there to come crashing through the door. But it never did. When morning finally came, we knew we had to make a run for it. We were too weak to fight, and staying in the cabin was a death sentence. We gathered what little strength we had left and bolted. The forest seemed to close in around us, the trees whispering threats, but we didn't stop. After what felt like an eternity, we stumbled out onto the road right in front of our car. We practically threw ourselves inside and tore out of there, not stopping until we hit the nearest town. We told the cops everything, but I don't think they believed us. They sent a search party, but they didn't find anything. No bodies, no creatures, nothing. Just an old abandoned logging site and a lot of unanswered questions. It's been a few weeks now and I'm still coughing. Jenny's not doing much better. We've been to doctors, but they can figure out what's wrong with us. All I know is something in that forest changed us, and I don't think we'll ever be the same. So, if you're ever thinking about going off the grid for a little adventure, maybe think twice. There are things out there, things you don't want to meet, and if you do, well, good fucking luck.